Does anybody need a set of notes tonight? Please raise a hand if you do. Good, everybody has them. There's a few extra that we will lay in the back. If you need extra copies of these, well, feel free to get those. We're thankful for everybody that's come tonight. Many are visiting with us, and we look around and see that so many have driven a long distance again just to be here with us. And we appreciate that so very much. It's encouraging, and let's just hope tonight that when you leave here you can say that it's really been good to have made the effort and the expense that you've been out in order to be here at this place with us. I hope you feel that way when you leave. We're studying the theory of premillennialism. Sunday morning we discussed the establishment of the kingdom, that premillennials teach that the kingdom was postponed. It hasn't been postponed. It was established on the first Pentecost day after the resurrection of Christ. It's spiritual in nature and not of this world, and so people have missed that feature and that nature about it. Sunday afternoon we talked and studied on the theory of premillennialism. I explained the overall theory of premillennialism and a lot of the things that are connected with it, a lot of the subtopics. And then we went in after the explanation of the theory and we talked about what's wrong with the theory, and I showed you many things that were wrong with it. It has 4 comings of Christ, it has 4 resurrections, and it has 4 judgments, along with many other things that are wrong about it. Then Monday evening we did the first part of a study on the identities of the beast in the book of Daniel and in Revelation, and last night we concluded that 2-part study on the beast and finished it up. So tonight we're discussing the 70 weeks of Daniel, and that's found in Daniel 9 and verses 24 to 27. But I want to introduce the thoughts tonight, and the scriptures are all typed out for you tonight. So just follow your notes with me. I didn't put an order on the board. I don't think you'll need them. But I want to read from Matthew 24 here at verse 15 through 21. Matthew 24, 15 through 21. Jesus is giving a discourse here on the destruction of Jerusalem, but people don't understand that about it. They think it's talking about the end of time and the end of the world when it's not. But Christ said, "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that are in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him that is on the housetop not go down to take out things that are in his house. And let him that is in the field not return back to take his cloak. But woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days. And pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath. For then shall be great tribulation, such as hath not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, nor ever shall be." So the passage speaks of a great, great tribulation here. That's verse 21 if you noticed. And that tribulation, by the way, is to come upon Judea and upon Jerusalem. However, the premillennial people believe that it's coming up on the whole world. And since they believe this tribulation is out here in the future, and we explained that Sunday afternoon in great detail, since they believe that there is a tribulation in the future, in order to escape it, they have come up with the theory of a coming rapture. And the rapture they define as a secret, invisible coming of Christ in the air to catch away the church off the earth and to take them to heaven for 7 years while this tribulation is going on. And this proof that they offer for this rapture, among other scriptures, is 1 Thessalonians 4. And let's read verse 13 through 18. Read with me, please. "But we would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them that fall asleep, that ye sorrow not, even as the rest who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also that are fallen asleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and that are left unto the coming of the Lord shall in no wise precede them that are fallen asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we that are alive, that are left, shall together with them be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words." That's the American Standard rendering of that passage. Now, if this passage is describing a secret rapture, it's really not very secret if you'll look at what's said here, especially in the latter verses of it here. The Lord will descend from heaven, it says, with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God. So what have we got here? We got a shout, we got a voice, we've got a trump. It sounds kind of noisy to me. This is supposed to be secret. All of a sudden we look around and people are just missing. I mean, you're flying in an airplane and all of a sudden your pilot's gone. He was a Christian. He's just raptured out of that plane. They have cars crashing everywhere on our highways and streets and interstates and such because the drivers that are Christian are suddenly just snatched out of it, see. All to get them off the earth because they believe that a great tribulation that they think is taught here in Matthew 24 that we read initially, they believe that's coming. But this is not talking about a secret invisible rapture here at all in Thessalonians, not whatsoever. Now after this coming rapture, when the church has been taken off the earth, how long does this great tribulation last? And the answer is they tell us 7 years. It'll be a 7-year tribulation. Where do they get 7 years for a tribulation? Folks, they get it in only one place in the Bible, and that's Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. I want you to always remember that. The 7-year time period for the Great Tribulation, they can only find it, they think, in one place in the Bible, and that's in Daniel 9, verse 24 to 27, and that's why this study is so very important. Let's read that prophecy. We'll be reading it a lot, quite a bit tonight. Read with me Daniel 9 at 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. He's talking to Daniel here. To finish the transgression and to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall even in troublous times. Pardon me. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even till the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now I'm sure you understood that real clearly, didn't you, that reading there? It's really not a difficult passage, but it's made to be difficult. And I don't want to look out tonight, I hope, and see a lot of deer in the headlight looks. But I'm expecting to see a few. So we're going to spend some time in this and pound on it and see if we can get over what these 70 weeks are all about. It's really a period of 490 years. I want you to remember that. It's a period of 490 years. And we'll talk about it in detail in a moment. But I want to talk to you first about some events that happened in Judah and Israel that preceded the prophecy given to Daniel here, and then we'll talk about this prophecy itself in just a moment. First, a little bit of a history lesson, so that when Daniel gets this message, and he got this message around 538 BC, this was told to him, and it's about 2 years before he and the others will be released out of Babylonian captivity. And so we need to know why they're in captivity and what's happened. Let me take you back in history to the time that Israel asked for a king. Samuel had been one of the last of the judges to judge Israel, and Israel had been ruled over by judges for about 450 years. God had used these judges. But now they began to cry out for a king in the days of Samuel, and Samuel warned them, you don't want a king, he will ruin you. But they wanted a king because Egypt and other nations had kings, and they wanted a king. And so God told Samuel, give them a king. He said, Samuel, they've not rejected you that you should reign over them. They rejected me because God had been their king. Now, God's the kind of king you want, because a king is a monarch. A king will just do what he wants to do. A king doesn't have a Congress. It's not a democracy. It's a kingdom. And so a king is the supreme ruler. And the king just takes things if he wants them. Now, with God as your king, you're always going to get a righteous king. He's always going to do the right thing by you and by everybody. But when you put a man on the throne like that, and he is a sole ruler of an empire or a kingdom, then he's going to get greedy. And this is what God wanted them to understand, but they didn't understand that. So God gave them a king. He gave them a man named Saul out of the tribe of Benjamin, and Saul reigned over them for 40 years. He was a wicked man. He was no good for them. And when he died, David, the shepherd boy, took over, and David also reigned 40 years. And when David died, his son Solomon took the throne. Solomon reigned 40 years. So Saul and David and Solomon all reigned 40 years each, a period of 120 years. All 12 tribes were together and had these different men to be their king. But after the death of Solomon, there was a rebellion in the kingdom of Israel. The 12 tribes had become weary of Solomon's rule and felt like that they were greatly mistreated. You see, Solomon was one of those guys that, as a king, he just took what he wanted. Now, he might have been a wise man, all right, but you got to wonder how wise he was. Solomon had 700 wives. How wise is that? He had 300 concubines or mistresses. In other words, Solomon had 1,000 women in his harem. If he spent the night with each of them, or one of them, one night in succession, it would be, 3 years nearly, getting around to all of his different wives just to spend one evening with them. And so it was not a very wise situation, but kings like that just take things they want. And when he saw a man's daughter that was beautiful, Solomon just took her. If he wanted her for a wife, he took her. If he wanted a field that you had, if he wanted your son for a soldier, if he needed your daughter for a cook, a baker, or your son for a baker or a butler, he just took them. If he needed some of your children for soldiers and everything, he just took them. Kings do that, see. And the people were tired of it, and they came to Solomon's son Rehoboam, and they told him that we're tired of how your father ruled. How are you going to rule over us? And basically Rehoboam told them that I'm going to be rougher than my father. And when they heard that, 10 of the tribes pulled away and formed a kingdom to the north. And 2 of the tribes stayed in the south, and they formed a kingdom. And now, just like America split during the Civil War, Israel split north and south, with Israel to the north composed of 10 tribes, and Judah to the south with 2 tribes. All of the kings that ruled over the 10 tribes in the north there were wicked. And folks, in 721 BC, God allowed the Assyrians, who were the world empire at that time, he allowed the Assyrians to come and to carry away a good portion of the population into captivity and scatter them throughout the nations that they controlled. Eventually, the Jews got wicked, the kingdom to the south that Daniel was at. And because it got wicked, God let the Babylonians capture them, because after Assyria fell, Babylon became the world empire at that time. Now, there were 3 invasions by Babylon into Judea and Jerusalem. Let me give you these dates. Babylon first came against Jerusalem in 606 BC. They carried away a lot of captives at that time. Daniel would have been among these captives that were taken over to Babylon. Ezekiel also was one of them. So when you read the book of Daniel and the book of Ezekiel, you're reading writings of men that were in captivity over in the land of Babylon, over in Chaldea. Jeremiah prophesied during that time, but Jeremiah was not part of the captivity. He got to stay in the land. And he's the one that wept over the condition of things and warned the Jews about any further uprisings. The Jews didn't listen to Jeremiah. Jeremiah tried to tell them, look, you've been carried away. Your people have been carried away captive, and your city's controlled by Babylon. Just go ahead and serve these people a while, and everything will be all right in the end. But they wouldn't listen. They kept rebelling. So Babylon came again in 597, 598. And they took even more captives and did even more destruction to Jerusalem. But the Jews wouldn't listen to Jeremiah. He kept warning them. And they kept rebelling and not submitting to Babylon and making alliances with Egypt, till finally about 586, 587, Babylon came a third time. And when they came this time, that was it. They just leveled the city of Jerusalem, knocked the walls down. They destroyed Solomon's temple. They carried all the vessels, of course, of gold and silver and brass and everything they could find that was valuable, and carried all that off to Babylon and took a multitude of captives over there. Daniel is among those captives. Now, because Daniel serves the Lord and loves the Lord, he has risen to a position of prominence in the Babylonian Empire. He's one of the wise men that advises the king. But nonetheless, he's in captivity. How long was the captivity to last over in Babylon? How long? Look down at the bottom there, a couple of scriptures in your notes. Jeremiah had made a prediction how long this would last, and he said it would last 70 years. It's going to last from 606 BC to 536 BC, a period of 70 years. Here's the scripture, Jeremiah 25, verse 11 and 12. Jeremiah says, speaking for the Lord, pardon me, speaking for the Lord, he said, this whole land shall be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith the Lord, for their iniquity, and the land of the Chaldeans, and will make it perpetual desolations. So you're going to serve the king of Babylon, he said, 70 years. Now Jeremiah 29, verse 1, then verses 4 to 7, then verse 10. Notice. Now these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders which were carried away captives, and to the priests and to the prophets, and to all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. In other words, Jeremiah wrote them an inspired letter. He's writing now to the elders. He's writing to the priest. He's writing to the prophets. He's writing to every Jew that's been carried away captive over to Babylon. Verse 4, here's what God says through Jeremiah. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, unto all that are carried away captives, whom I've caused to be carried away from Jerusalem unto Babylon. Build ye houses and dwell in them, and plant gardens and eat the fruit of them. Take ye wives and beget sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters, that ye may be increased there and not diminished. And seek the peace of the city whither I have caused you to be carried away captives, and pray unto the Lord for it, for in the peace thereof shall ye have peace. Now verse 10. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you, and perform my good word toward you in causing you to return to this place. 70 years now, you can see, is the period of captivity that the Jews are going to be in Babylon. This all started in 606 BC. And now it's 538 BC. About 68 years have passed. There's about 2 years left of this captivity. And Daniel is still over here in Babylon. He is a captive, although he's been given a lot of liberty and has risen to prominence in that kingdom. He begins to read and he begins to understand these prophecies we just read from Jeremiah, how this captivity was going to last for 70 years. So he read Jeremiah 25 that we just read. He read Jeremiah 29. And it occurs to Daniel now, we're going to be here 70 years, and this is coming to a close. He can see that now. And so he sets his face toward God to pray to him. And folks, this 9th chapter of Daniel is absolutely, I think, one of the most beautiful prayers you'll read about anywhere. It may be the most beautiful prayer we can ever read. But I want to read now Daniel 9 with you, all 27 verses, but I want to start up here. I broke it into 3 or 4 sections for us. First of all, let's read Daniel 9 at verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And I set my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplications with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. So Daniel says, I finally saw what Jeremiah was saying, that this captivity was to be for 70 years. Now let me picture something else before we read Daniel's prayer that you've got to imagine. Daniel knows that his beloved city, Jerusalem, has just been leveled to the ground. And the temple that he saw as a young man is gone. The one that Solomon built, the one that was so magnificent and beautiful. The place of worship, the place where God had recorded his name. All of Jerusalem is a heap. And God's people are scattered and captive, and many have been killed. And they've been over here in this strange country now for many, many years, while their homeland just lies in desolation. If you will, picture yourself, say, being transported over to Russia as a captivity, and all of these places around here that are so beautiful have been leveled, and everything that you love. The city of Harrison or Alpena, all of this place is just in shambles. The houses are gone. Many of your loved ones were killed. Many have been taken captive, and you're sitting over in Russia and thinking back on the good old state of Arkansas in the USA, and in particular this area in the Ozarks, and how beautiful it was and how desolate it is now. Think how your heart would be so burdened and so sad. You've got to get a picture of what Daniel feels. And this is just tearing him up. All right, now verse 4. Let's watch his prayer. Watch this. I prayed unto the Lord my God and made my confession and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him and to them that keep his commandments, we have sinned and have committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled, even by departing from thy precepts and from thy judgments. Neither have we hearkened unto thy servants the prophets, which spake in thy name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day. To the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel that are near and that are afar off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass that they've trespassed against thee. O Lord, to us belongeth confusion of face, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we've sinned against thee. To the Lord our God belong our mercies and forgivenesses, though we have rebelled against him. Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yea, all Israel have transgressed thy law, even by departing that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. He's talking about Deuteronomy, chapter 18, and other places in particular. And he hath confirmed his words which he spake against us and against our judges that judged us, by bringing upon us a great evil. For under the whole heaven hath not been done as it hath been done upon Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil is come upon us. Yet made we not our prayer before the Lord our God, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand thy truth. Therefore hath the Lord watched upon the evil and brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all his works which he doeth. For we obeyed not his voice. And now, O Lord our God, that hast brought thy people forth out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and hast gotten thee renowned as at this day, we have sinned. We have done wickedly. O Lord, according to all thy righteousness, I beseech thee, let thine anger and thy fury be turned away from thy city Jerusalem, thy holy mountain. Because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and thy people are become a reproach to all that are about us. Now therefore, O our God, hear the prayer of thy servant and his supplications, and cause thy face to shine upon thy sanctuary that is desolate, for the Lord's sake. O my God, incline thine ear and hear. Open thine eyes and behold our desolations, and the city which is called by thy name. For we do not present our supplication before thee for our righteousnesses, but for thy great mercies. O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake, O my God. For thy city and thy people are called by thy name. Isn't that a prayer? He's confessed the sins of his people multiple times in this. He's told God, I'm not asking you these things because we're righteous, because of our righteousness, but because of your mercy. God, I'm casting myself upon your great mercy. Hear this prayer. What a beautiful prayer that is. Now verse 20. And whiles I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, whiles I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I'd seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Now Gabriel's going to share with him some things that's going to befall this nation. And these are these 70 weeks that we're talking about in this study. Now verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Now I want you to notice that. The 70 weeks are determined upon Daniel's people, upon Daniel's holy city. That's the Jews and Jerusalem. See that? This is a Jewish prophecy. Doesn't have anything to do with us. It affects Jerusalem and the Jews. That's what it's about. 70 weeks, whatever that means, are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Now notice, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince, that's Christ, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now we're going to break all this down. Don't worry. Let's get the headlight look out of your eyes here a minute. Let's understand what Daniel's being told. Let's look at these 70 weeks. This word weeks is the Hebrew word, and I put it down there for you, Shabuah. It is Strong's number 7620 in your Hebrew dictionary, in your Strong's. The word literally means sevened. 70 sevens. And so it's translated weeks here, but it really, the Hebrew word is sevens. These are groups of sevens. This word could refer to 7 cows, 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, 7 anything. These are groups of 7, 77s. You see, Daniel and them have been a captive down here in Babylon for 70 years. And he's being told concerning the fate of his people that 70 sevens. 70, not just years, but weeks of years. What is a week of days, folks? How many days in a week? You say, well, Pat, there's 7 days in a week. All right, how many years are in a week of years? 7 years. If you got a week of days, how many days? 7. If you got a week of years, how many years is it? 7. 1 week is equal to 7 years. See that? just like a week usually is equal to 7 days. 70 weeks. They've been 70 years in captivity, but concerning the fate of Jerusalem in this place, 77s, 70 weeks of years. Not just 70 years, but weeks of years. And so 1 week is the equivalent of 7 years, and if you got 70 weeks, it's 70 times 7 years. That's 490 years. That's what we're talking about. That's this period. The context tells us what these sevens are, and it's referring to weeks of years. He's been talking about the years of their captivity in Babylon, and these are weeks of years. So now instead of 70 years, we're dealing with 490 years. We're dealing with 70 weeks of years. If it were 70 weeks of days, it would be 490 days, wouldn't it? 70 weeks, if we're thinking days, is 490 days. Isn't that simple? Then 70 weeks, if we're referring to years, are 490 years. So each week is the equivalent of 7 years. That's not difficult now. Quit looking at me like that. It's 490 years. That's the period of time. So when I read to you, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, 490 years are determined upon your people and upon your holy city. Daniel's going to be told from the future on here what's going to happen to his people. He knows what's happened in the past. And now Gabriel has come to him to make him know what's going to happen among the Jewish people in the years that are coming. In fact, over the next 490 years. So that's really what this prophecy is about. Now, well, I'll show you this down at the bottom on page 3, but go to page 3 with me. I think I'm going to leave that down there a little bit later on. The question then is, how do we calculate a starting point for these 70 weeks or 490 years? Where do we start at? What is the year where we start marking forward 490 years into the future? Where is it? The answer is given in verse 25. Here it is. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall even in troublous times. How much is a score, people? When Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, and he said 80 and so many years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent, a score is 20 years. Lincoln was talking about 80 years, 80. See? All right, this is a score here, and the word score is 80. How many is 80? If a score is 20, 80 are 60, aren't they? So this period from the command to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah is 7 weeks. Now I said that a week is worth 7 years. How many would 7 weeks of years be? 7 sevens is 49, isn't it? 7 weeks is 49 years, because these are not weeks of days. They're 7 weeks of days is 49 days, isn't it? Isn't that right? 7 weeks is 49 days. If the weeks are weeks of years, sevens of years, then 7 times 7 years each is 49 years, see? So this period of time from the command to restore and build Jerusalem will be 7 weeks or 49 years. And then 62 weeks or 62 weeks. Now what's 62 times 7? Well, it's 434 years. And when you add 49 and 434 together, it comes to 483. In other words, you've got 7 years or 7 weeks, and you've got 62 weeks. That's 69 of the 70 weeks. And that's a period of 483 years. So he tells Daniel, I want you to know that from the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, to the coming of Jesus, it's going to be 7 weeks, and then 62 or 62 weeks. He divides these up because part of this first period here is going to be when the city's going to get rebuilt. And then the rest of this is just filling time here. I think that's the only reason. He could have said 69 weeks from the commandment to restore Jerusalem unto the coming of the Messiah, to Messiah the Prince. That would be 69 of those weeks. So in this prophecy, 483 years of the 490 years are mentioned right here. From the commandment to the restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah would be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 7 plus 62, 69 weeks of years, which are 483 years. That uses up everything but 7 years, doesn't it? That just leaves 7 years, 1 week left, because we've used 69 of the weeks just getting to Christ. From the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem unto Jesus will be 69 of these weeks. Do you understand that? Somebody nod. It's 483 years from the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem until the coming of Jesus, okay? How does that help? That's 69 of the 70 weeks. Okay, 483 years. Now, the question is, how do we determine where to start the time clock to get from the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the coming of Jesus? And the answer is, well, we really go to the time when Christ appeared in history and then count back 483 years, and we should find a date back there that will fit, and we do. The problem is there were 3 decrees given, and I put them down here and turn to the back page. Got you a chart back here. Look down at the bottom along the left. And those 3 little boxes, one will say Ezra 1, 1 to 4, Ezra 6, 1 to 12, and Ezra 7, 7 to 27. You see those. Look right above them is Ezra 6, 14. Ezra mentions 3 decrees. Now let's read this together. Ezra 6, 14 there. And the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius, or Darius, however you pronounce that, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So he mentions a commandment from Cyrus, Darius, or Darius, and Artaxerxes. Now, read these little boxes down below that with me here, one at a time. First from Ezra 1, verse 1 to 4. The first decree to return and to start rebuilding was given by was given by Cyrus in 536 BC, about 2 years after Daniel was given this prophecy. So along about 536 is his first decree. Here it is. I have it up here on the board. Cyrus. But let's read my remarks down there. Cyrus made the first decree in fulfillment of Isaiah 44, 26 to 28, and Isaiah 45, 13 and 536. But it related specifically to the temple, but the decree was later used as authority to continue that work and ultimately rebuild Jerusalem. This decree is not the decree we're looking for, because it concerned the rebuilding of the temple, not the rebuilding of Jerusalem. So that's not going to be a good date for us. But there's another decree here in Ezra 6, 1 to 12. This was issued in 520 BC by Darius, or Darius the Persian. He decreed that the temple would be finished, but this decree was related specifically to the temple, not to the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem. And we're looking for Jerusalem and the building of it. And so this 520 date is not real good either. Darius, or Darius, was building off the original decree of Cyrus on this rebuilding. There's another decree. In fact, there's 2 more, and they were given by Artaxerxes. And if Hadassah was here today, Artaxerxes would be Ahasuerus there in the book of Esther. This would have been Hadassah's husband. So that's who Artaxerxes is. And so I love her name. I just love her. That's Esther in the book of Esther, by the way. And so you just got to love her little name. Nonetheless, Artaxerxes was the Ahasuerus there in the book of Esther. And he made 2 different decrees about rebuilding. He gave one in 457 BC, and that one was really, he authorized work to beautify the temple. About 12 years later, Nehemiah 2, 1 to 8, in the year 445, he ordered the rebuilding of Jerusalem. But both of these are made by Artaxerxes, and they're treated as only one decree up here in Ezra 6:14. So even though there's really 4 decrees, they're treated as 3 by Ezra. And so one of these dates of 457, 445 are going to have to work, and they're treated as one decree, even though one was more inclined toward the temple and the other toward Jerusalem. They're still considered to be one. And one of these will be our starting point. Now, all we've got to do to get this 490 years started and find out where to start is go over to the coming of the Messiah, the Prince. Because from the commandment to rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah was 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 of those weeks, or 483 of the 490 years. Jesus began his ministry and was announced as the Messiah after his baptism in around 26, 27 AD. This is really the date for the Lord's baptism right here. Now, if we go to that date, folks, and we count backwards, 69 of these 70 weeks, that's 7 week and then that 62 week combined, the 483 of the 490 weeks, or years rather, it takes us back to the year, incidentally, 457, and that was one of these decrees. And so it fits. So we use the 457 starting date. From the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, or 62 weeks. He says that the streets shall be built again, and the walls even in troublous times. So Jerusalem, the temple rather, was refurbished, and the city and the walls were rebuilt. And this other 62 weeks is just filler. There's nothing that was to happen in there. It's just blank space to fill up the time between the decree to rebuild and the coming of Jesus. This first 7 weeks would cover the rebuilding process of the city and things like that, but this other 62 weeks here is just a space of time in between with no events that were specified in this prophecy. Now, there were some things that were to occur after this 62 weeks, or really after the full 69, and we want to look at those now. And if you'll go back to page 3 with me. I think I'm going to have you look down at the bottom of the page with me. I want to show you something right now. We might as well get this done. And I'll probably come back to it here in a minute anyway. I'm going to rub some of this out where I can chart it out for you. What the premillennials do, and I put you a chart of it down here at the bottom, a diagram, they start at 445 instead of 457. They run this prophecy out into the future, and they use 69 of these weeks out of the 70, and they use 483 of the 490 years, and they stop the prophecy at 38 AD, after the death and resurrection of Christ, a few years. They run from 445 BC to 38 AD, and then they just put the brakes on this prophecy without any reason. They just stop it. They shut it down. It's like the prophecy just stops because they need 7 years left for a tribulation. Do you understand what I'm telling you? They need the 70th week. So they use 69 weeks, and they save the 70th week up, and they put a big old gap in here. And we're living in that gap right now, according to them. Over here in the future, when they think the rapture is going to occur, they will pick up this 70th week, this last one that they saved, because they need a tribulation period. That's what they're doing. They don't care to stop a prophecy. They'll just stop it for no reason because they need 7 years. See, that makes no sense, does it? They just shut God's timetable down. And they save them back 7 years, this last 1 week of 7 years, because they need a tribulation after the rapture, according to their theory. So they're going to have the rapture occur, and then they'll use that 1 week of years that's left, those 7 years, for their tribulation. Up until then, from 38 AD until now and going on into the future, when the rapture is supposed to occur, we're in that gap period. And then after the rapture, they'll start that last 7 weeks. Now, how have they shut this prophecy down? By what authority? They don't have any authority. That's why you and I have got to know what this prophecy is teaching. And that's why I'm taking us through it tonight. That 70th week has already happened. What I'm trying to tell you is there is no 7 years left for tribulation, because you can't put the brakes on this prophecy. Now, they started in 445 off this decree right here, when really it fits 457, because from the command to restore and build Jerusalem to the Messiah the Prince was to be 69 of these weeks. They started at 445, and instead of going to 27, they go over here to 38, see. But nonetheless, the prophecy must run continually, and that's what it does. They have shut it down for no reason, just because they need 7 years. You can't do God's word that way. They've got a tribulation theory, and they want 7 years for it. And dadgummit, they're going to save 7 off these 490 by hook or crook. That's really what it boils down to. Are you understanding me? They just shut a prophecy down to save 7 years for tribulation. That's just dishonest. That's not dealing with Scripture. The problem is there were some things, this prophecy keeps going. We're right on starting in 457, and 69 of those weeks are used at the time that Jesus begins his ministry at his baptism. And now there's a full week left, that 1 week that they're saving for their tribulation. It should keep on going, and it does, because in the middle of this last week is when Jesus dies. And that's mentioned here in the prophecy. Now let's read some things. Number 6. Several things were to be done during the 70 weeks, and especially the 70th week. Let's read verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So those things were going to occur. These are things that were mostly accomplished by Jesus. To finish the transgression probably refers to let the Jews' rejection of God reach its limits, to finish it. Jesus, at his death and his sacrifice and his shedding of his blood, made an end of sins, made reconciliation for iniquity, brought in everlasting righteousness, seals up the vision and prophecy, anoints the most holy. All of these things were to be accomplished by Christ during this time right here. Now, look at point number 7 with me on page 3. There are other things that were to occur after these 69 weeks, or during the 70th week. Now, I want to show you these things. During the last 7 years that the premillennials are saving, the prophecy really continues. There's no way to stop it. Look at Daniel 9 now, 26, 27. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end thereof shall be with the flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. See that? See that 1 week? That's the last week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Now, there's several things down through here we want to notice off this one scripture here. Daniel is told that after these 62 weeks right here, the Messiah is going to be cut off. Remember, from the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem to the Messiah, used up 69 weeks. But after these 62, after the 7 and then after the 62, the Messiah would be cut off. But Daniel's told he would be cut off not for himself. He was cut off for us, wouldn't he? Jesus died for us. So after the 62 weeks, the Messiah was to be cut off. He was to die. But it says not for himself. It was, of course, for us that he died. He was cut off. Number 2, if you'll look at verse 27 up there under point 7, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. During this 70th week, the covenant was to be confirmed with the Jews, and that's the new covenant. Now, Jesus did that for 3.5 of those years while he was here on earth during his ministry. He confirmed the covenant. And after his death, for the next 3.5 years, the apostles confirmed that around Jerusalem and Judea, because this prophecy is about Jerusalem. And the gospel was preached around that area for 3.5 years by Christ, and then around 3.5 probably by the apostles after his death. They confirmed that covenant with miracles. Look at me now here and read Hebrews 2, verse 3 and 4 about this confirmation. How shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him, God also bearing them witness both with signs and wonders and divers miracles and gifts of the Holy Ghost, according to his own will. Now Mark 16, 19 and 20. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven, and sat on the right hand of God, and they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. Now listen. After the 62 weeks, the Messiah was to be cut off. That's the death of Christ during the 70th week. Also, this covenant the New Testament we're under was to be confirmed for 1 week. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, or for this 7 years, this 70th week that they're saving, see. That's why they don't have a 70th week to save, because this last week is when the covenant was confirmed with the Jews. It was confirmed by Christ for 3.5 years, and through the apostles with them there at Jerusalem for another 3.5. And so this last week was the covenant was confirmed. The Messiah was cut off. He confirmed the covenant for that week. The New Testament did that by miraculous signs. Now look at point C here. We were told that he would cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. When Jesus died on the cross, did God accept animal sacrifices any longer? That all ceased, didn't it? Did the Jews keep offering sacrifice? They did, but God wouldn't accept it. You see, in the middle of the 70th week, he was to cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. That's why the 70 weeks keeps on running. This last week keeps going, because right in the middle of that, when Jesus died in 30 AD, he caused the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. God no longer accepted animal sacrifice, even though the Jews tried to offer it. Colossians 2:14, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. Hebrews 10, verse 1 to 4. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year continually, make the comers thereunto perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered, because that the worshippers, once purged, should have had no more conscience of sins. But in those sacrifices there's a remembrance made again of sins every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and of goats should take away sins. When Jesus died on the cross, he made the sacrifice that had been offered there at the temple unacceptable to God any longer, because now it's the Lord's blood that was shed on the cross that would make an atonement for sin, not the animals. See? And that happened during this 70th week. That's why the prophecy can't be stopped. It's got to allow it to be run its course. And it ends in 33 AD. From 457 to the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, to the Messiah used up 69 weeks, leaving this last week. And during this last week, the Messiah was cut off. There's the death of Christ. He confirmed the covenant, the New Testament for many, for 1 week, that full 7 years. And in the midst of the week, he caused the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Jesus died right here at 30 AD in the midst of this last week, this last 7 years. He had a 3.5 year ministry, and he preached to the Jews. The apostles did so there at Jerusalem after his death there, confirming that covenant. And this ends the 70 weeks right here. Now Daniel throws in something, as a matter of fact, if you'll look at point D. He said that their house would be left desolate to them. When the Jews rejected Jesus Christ, people, God pulled out of the temple. God abandoned them. God left their house desolate. That was no longer God's dwelling place. God dwells in the church now, in his people. He didn't dwell in that temple any longer. That house was left desolate. This is what Jesus told the Jews. Look at Matthew 23, verse 34 to 39. Read with me. Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them ye shall kill and crucify. Some of them ye shall scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Listen. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Now listen. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, ye shall not see me henceforth, till ye shall say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Your house is left desolate. Would you go up under number 7 up there and read with me? Verse 26 and 27 again. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, and not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with the flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Now notice, for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Because the Jews rejected Christ, that house, that temple, and all there at Jerusalem was left desolate. God abandoned them. And they just kept rejecting Christ for the most part and continuing in sin until in 70 AD, 40 years later nearly, 40 years after the Lord died, God allowed the Roman armies to come against Jerusalem and literally destroy that temple in the city that was left desolate. I want you to read down at the bottom Luke 19 and verse 41 to 44. Then I'm going to sum this up and hopefully make it more clear. Luke 19, 41 to 44. This is Jesus. When he was come near and beheld the city, he wept over it, talking about Jerusalem, saying, if thou hadst known, even thou at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they're hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. Friends, in 70 AD, the Romans came against Jerusalem. And even though the temple had been rebuilt and was beautiful and such things, the Romans killed 1,100,000 Jews. They destroyed the city of Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian and there at that siege, said that when Rome got through with Jerusalem, it looked like a plowed field. You hardly even knew a city had been there. They carried away Jews captive down into Egypt and sold them as slaves until they run out of buyers. But they sold about 99,200 down there as slaves. I just couldn't find any more buyers for them. They literally destroyed this place. Now let me capsulize all this again and show you what this prophecy is about and why it's important. Stay with me, please. Daniel has been taken captive around 606. In 538 BC, he begins to understand that Jeremiah predicted there'd be 70 years during this captivity, and 68 of them's already gone. And so he understands these prophecies now, and he asked God for his blessings. And God sent Gabriel the angel to him and said, I'm going to tell you, Daniel, you've been praying about your people. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to your people and to your city. 70 weeks are determined upon thy city and upon thy upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem, 457, unto the Messiah the Prince, 2627 AD, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 62 more weeks, or 69 weeks, 483 of these years. The walls shall be built again, and the streets again, and the walls even in troublous times. Then he said, after 62 weeks, during this last week that's left, shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Then he said of Christ, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, the 70th week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease by his death. See? And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. The Lord pulled out and left Jerusalem desolate, and then years later, 40 years later, he sent the Romans and leveled that city. And Daniel's being told way back here what all's going to happen to his people. But as I tell you, the premillennial people need 7 years for tribulation. So they start this prophecy not at 457. They start at, say, here at 445. They run 69 of these weeks over here to 38 AD, and then they just stop it. Now they can't do that because the Lord died right in the middle of the 70th week. And they stop it over here way after his death before they even get to 70 weeks. But they need 7 more years, and so they're holding them like you'd put money in a bank. They're just saving 7 years up because they need a tribulation. And they're stealing it out of this prophecy that has long run its course and already ended, see. And what I'm telling all of you tonight is they don't have 7 years left for tribulation. There's no other place in the Bible you can get one. They pervert this prophecy in order to steal 7 years out of it. But the prophecy's already run through the 70 weeks and it's long gone. And there aren't 7 years left for tribulation. That's why it's important to understand it. And I don't know if I'm getting this over to you, but they just don't have any time left for tribulation. There's no other place to get it in the Bible. So you can forget about a 7-year tribulation. You can't get it out of this prophecy. This is fulfilled already. It's already gone. The next 2 nights, I want to talk to you about modern day time setters. I want to talk to you about the destruction of Jerusalem in Matthew 24. When we read there in Daniel 9 that for the overspreading of abominations that he would make this desolate, he said the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with the flood. Jesus gave another discourse on that, and this will be very easily understood, this discourse, I think, will, compared to tonight. And I know you've had a little trouble tonight. I can look out and see that. And I'm not going to blame you tonight. That may be me. It may be just that I can't get this over. But I hope that you're getting some of this tonight. If you'll come back the next 2 nights, we won't be talking near as long these next 2 nights, I hope, and we'll split this study up into 2 parts. I want to study Matthew 24 with you, the first 34 verses. We'll study it verse by verse, and then Friday night, I'm going to take you through a chart to show you how these modern day time setters, like Hal Lindsey and Jack Van Impe and others, have made all these predictions about the return of Jesus and where they're getting their information to do that and make those predictions. I'll show you exactly why they calculate the dates they have, and we'll study that, and I think that'll be useful information too. And then Friday evening when I get through, I'll give you a quick summary of this chart again on premillennialism and show you how we have systematically these last several services gone through this theory here, and we have systematically taken every argument that it has and shown why it's false. So I hope you can come back the next 2 nights for that. I've talked long enough tonight. I'm going to let you go. Let's have a song of invitation, a verse or two of it. And if anyone's in need of Christ, we would invite you to come forward now while we rise and sing this song.